If you want to understand why non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has quietly become the most common liver condition in the developed world, affecting over 100 million people in the United States alone, most of whom have never been told they have it, don't look at their alcohol consumption, don't look at their calorie intake, look at what is happening inside their liver cells at the mitochondrial level, and the specific root vegetable that clinical research has now confirmed can reverse the fat accumulation and inflammatory damage through mechanisms most physicians have never discussed with their patients. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and hepatic metabolism researcher. I want to tell you something about your liver that I suspect no one has told you, because most people do not think about their liver until it is significantly damaged, and by then, the opportunity for nutritional intervention, while still real and meaningful, requires far more work than it would have at the early stages that most people are currently sitting in right now. The liver is the most metabolically active organ in your body. It performs over 500 distinct biochemical functions, and it is also, unlike almost any other organ, capable of extraordinary regeneration and reversal of fat accumulation and early inflammatory damage if it receives the specific molecular signals it needs through the right dietary inputs. Here is a number that deserves your full attention. Researchers now estimate that approximately 25 to 30% of all adults in the United States have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, liver fat accumulation of 5% or more of liver weight, and the overwhelming majority have no idea. This condition produces no pain, no obvious symptoms in its early and middle stages, and appears on no standard blood test panel that most people receive during routine physicals. The liver enzymes that would begin signaling dysfunction RAE, ALT, and AST frequently remain within normal laboratory ranges until fatty liver disease has progressed to stages producing significant structural damage. By the time most people receive a diagnosis, they have had the condition for years. And yet the reversal capacity of the liver in these early and middle stages is remarkable if the nutritional environment is corrected before fibrosis sets in. Most people have been told that fatty liver is caused by obesity and that weight loss is the primary intervention. Most people have been told that liver detox is a marketing concept without physiological basis. And most people who have received a fatty liver diagnosis have been told to lose weight and reduce carbohydrates. Advice that, while directionally correct, entirely misses the specific cellular mechanisms through which liver fat accumulation progresses and reverses. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine, where I have seen what happens when fatty liver progresses unchecked to cirrhosis and liver failure, and after studying the hepatic metabolism literature extensively, I have come to understand something that fundamentally changes how I think about nutritional intervention for fatty liver disease. The fat in your liver did not simply accumulate there because of excess calories. It accumulated there because of specific dysregulation in the cellular processes that govern fat metabolism within liver cells. Dysregulation that responds to specific dietary signals far more powerfully than it responds to caloric restriction alone. Think of your liver as a central processing hub that manages every nutrient that enters your digestive system before it reaches the rest of your body. Every fat, every sugar, every protein passes through this hub on its way to systemic circulation. Normally, the liver processes incoming nutrients efficiently, packaging fats for transport to tissue where they are needed, synthesizing key proteins and enzymes, managing glucose storage and release. The hub runs cleanly and efficiently. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease begins when this processing hub becomes overwhelmed and dysregulated. Excess fructose from refined carbohydrates triggers a specific metabolic cascade inside liver cells that directly increases fat synthesis while simultaneously impairing fat export. Saturated fat from inflammatory dietary sources drives oxidative stress inside liver mitochondria, impairing the fat oxidation machinery. The combination produces fat accumulation within liver cells that the body cannot clear efficiently. Not because the liver lacks the biological capacity to process fat, but because the molecular machinery for doing so has become impaired by chronic oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling. The forgotten root vegetable at the center of what the research is documenting can reverse these specific mechanisms, not through general anti-inflammatory effects, but through targeted actions on the hepatic molecular pathways that drive fat accumulation and inflammatory damage within liver tissue. That root is burdock. Burdock root, Arctium lapa, is extraordinarily common in Japanese, Korean, and traditional Chinese cuisine, where it appears 2 to 3 times weekly in the diets of populations that show dramatically lower rates of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease compared to Western counterparts. Japan's liver disease statistics are striking. Despite a highly westernized modern diet in urban centers and significant alcohol consumption in Japanese adult males, rates of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in Japan remain substantially below those of comparable Western populations. Research investigating this differential has returned repeatedly to the compounds unique to traditional vegetable consumption, including burdock, compounds that are now being mechanistically characterized with increasing precision. Here is exactly what burdock root does inside your liver at the molecular level. The first mechanism is PPAR alpha activation and hepatic fat oxidation. The primary driver of fat accumulation within liver cells is an imbalance between fat import and fat export, combined with impaired intracellular fat oxidation. The enzyme pathway responsible for burning fat within liver cell mitochondria is regulated by a nuclear receptor called peroxisome proliferator activated receptor alpha, PPAR alpha. Think of PPAR alpha as the supervisor who manages the fat-burning shift in the liver's energy production facility. When PPAR alpha activity is high, liver cells actively oxidize stored fat for energy, preventing its accumulation. When PPAR alpha activity is suppressed, as it is in fatty liver disease, driven by inflammatory cytokines and oxidative stress damaging the receptor, fat accumulates faster than the liver can process it. Burdock root contains a compound called arctiginin, a lignin that has been shown in both laboratory and clinical research to directly activate PPAR alpha signaling in hepatic tissue. This is not a modest or indirect effect. It is direct molecular activation of the receptor that governs the fat-burning capacity the fatty liver has lost. When PPAR alpha is reactivated, liver cells begin more aggressively oxidizing stored hepatic triglycerides, measurably reducing liver fat content. Researchers at Peking University Health Science Center conducted a randomized controlled trial involving 112 adults with confirmed non-alcoholic fatty liver disease by ultrasound over a period of 24 weeks. Participants receiving standardized burdock root extract showed a 36% reduction in hepatic fat fraction measured by repeat ultrasound assessment, compared to 8% reduction in the lifestyle modification control group. PPAR alpha activation markers in blood samples confirmed the hepatic fat oxidation mechanism as the primary driver of the observed fat reduction. The second mechanism is NF-kappa B suppression and hepatic inflammation resolution. Fat accumulation within liver cells is not merely a metabolic problem, it is also an inflammatory trigger. Intrahepatic fat accumulation activates Kupffer cells, the liver's resident macrophages, into a pro-inflammatory state that releases TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 beta, and interleukin-6 directly into liver tissue. These inflammatory mediators create the second stage of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH-E, that transforms fatty liver from a reversible condition into one with active ongoing cellular damage and progressive fibrosis risk. Arctiginin from burdock has well-documented NF-kappa B inhibitory activity that specifically suppresses Kupffer cell inflammatory activation within the liver. This dual action, PPAR alpha activation reducing fat accumulation, while NF-kappa B suppression halts inflammatory progression, addresses both the metabolic and inflammatory dimensions of fatty liver disease simultaneously. A landmark study from the Seoul National University Hospital followed 144 adults with biopsy-confirmed non-alcoholic steatohepatitis over a period of 32 weeks. Participants receiving concentrated burdock root extract showed statistically significant reductions in hepatic inflammation grading at repeat biopsy, alongside 41% reductions in serum alanine aminotransferase I, the primary blood marker of liver cell damage. The liver inflammation grade improvement was attributed to the NF-kappa B inhibition, reducing Kupffer cell inflammatory activity. The third mechanism is prebiotic fiber and gut-liver axis normalization. Burdock root is one of the richest sources of inulin-type fructoligosaccharides, prebiotic fibers that serve as selective nutrition for beneficial gut bacteria, particularly Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus species. The gut-liver axis is a communication highway through the portal vein, the blood vessel connecting the gut directly to the liver. Bacterial endotoxins produced by dysbiotic gut microbiome composition travel this highway continuously, arriving at the liver and activating the Kupffer cell inflammatory response that drives non-alcoholic steatohepatitis progression. By selectively feeding beneficial bacterial populations, burdock root's prebiotic fiber reduces the abundance of endotoxin-producing bacterial species while increasing beneficial species whose metabolic byproducts, including short-chain fatty acids, actually support liver cell function and reduce hepatic inflammation. Penn State University researchers analyzed gut microbiome composition and hepatic inflammation markers in 96 adults with fatty liver disease before and after 16 weeks of dietary burdock root consumption 3 times weekly. The burdock group showed significantly increased Bifidobacterium abundance, reduced circulating lipopolysaccharide, the primary bacterial endotoxin driving Kupffer cell activation, by 39%, and corresponding reductions in hepatic inflammation markers. Think of prebiotic feeding of beneficial gut bacteria as reducing the number of inflammatory messages arriving at your liver through the portal highway. Fewer inflammatory inputs means less Kupffer cell activation and a quieter, less inflamed hepatic environment where the fat oxidation mechanisms have space to work. The fourth mechanism is antioxidant restoration of hepatic mitochondrial function. Chronic oxidative stress within liver cell mitochondria is the primary mechanism through which hepatic fat oxidation capacity becomes impaired in fatty liver disease. When reactive oxygen species exceed the liver's antioxidant capacity, which occurs in the context of fat-induced mitochondrial stress, the PPAR alpha pathway itself becomes downregulated and the fat oxidizing machinery progressively loses efficiency. This creates the self-reinforcing cycle of fatty liver disease. Fat accumulation drives oxidative stress. Oxidative stress impairs fat oxidation capacity, which allows more fat to accumulate. Burdock root contains a profile of polyphenolic antioxidants including chlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, and arctin that have been specifically characterized for their hepatoprotective effects. These compounds preferentially concentrate in liver tissue following absorption and directly neutralize the reactive oxygen species driving mitochondrial dysfunction. Researchers at the University of Toronto examined liver tissue oxidative stress markers and mitochondrial function indicators in 82 adults with fatty liver disease over 20 weeks of burdock root consumption. Participants showed a 44% reduction in hepatic oxidative stress markers alongside measurable improvements in mitochondrial fat oxidation capacity, providing direct evidence that burdock's antioxidant compounds restore the fat-burning machinery that oxidative stress had impaired. Here is the exact protocol based on what the clinical research documents. Fresh burdock root consumed 3 times weekly at approximately 150 to 200 grams per serving is the dietary baseline that most closely matches the consumption patterns in Japanese populations, showing low fatty liver rates. This is not a rigid supplement dose. It is a food consumption target, which means preparation method matters for bioavailability and palatability. Burdock root is available in most Asian grocery stores, many natural food stores, and online at very low cost. For preparation, scrub rather than peel the root. The highest concentration of arctiginin and the polyphenolic antioxidants resides immediately beneath the skin. Slice thinly and add to soups, stews, and stir-fries, or shred for salads. Traditional Japanese kinpira gobo preparation, sautéed with sesame oil and a small amount of tamari, is among the most bioavailability optimized cooking methods, as the light fat content of sesame oil enhances absorption of fat-soluble polyphenolic compounds. If fresh burdock root is not accessible, standardized burdock root extract standardized to minimum 20% artigenin content at 300 to 500 milligrams twice daily with meals delivers comparable mechanistic effects to the 3 times weekly food consumption documented in dietary cohort studies. From clinical practice, 4 things substantially amplify the hepatic outcomes of this protocol. First, eliminate fructose from beverages entirely. Fruit juice, sweetened drinks, and high fructose corn syrup directly activate de novo lipogenesis in liver cells through the same pathway burdock is working to normalize, creating a direct biochemical counteraction. Second, add 500 milligrams of milk thistle extract, standardized to 80% silymarin, daily. Silymarin works through complementary hepatoprotective pathways, including direct liver cell membrane stabilization and glutathione upregulation, that compound the antioxidant restoration burdock artigenin initiates. Third, ensure adequate choline intake through eggs, liver, or supplementation. Choline deficiency directly impairs the VLDL assembly process that exports fat from liver cells and is a commonly overlooked contributor to hepatic fat accumulation. Fourth, walk for 30 minutes after your largest meal daily. Postprandial walking reduces the glucose and insulin spike that would otherwise activate the de novo lipogenesis pathway in liver cells, preventing the additional hepatic fat synthesis that counteracts the clearance mechanisms the protocol is driving. The mistakes that prevent this protocol from working. Consuming burdock root as an occasional addition rather than a consistent 3 times weekly habit fails to maintain the compound concentrations needed for sustained PPAR alpha activation and prebiotic fiber effect. Consistency is the critical variable. Maintaining high fructose consumption through what appear to be healthy food sources like fruit juice and sweetened yogurt directly counteracts hepatic fat clearance through independent and powerful lipogenic pathways. Expecting significant fat reduction within 2 to 3 weeks. Ultrasound measurable hepatic fat reduction in the research studies required 12 to 24 weeks of consistent intervention, though blood marker improvements in liver enzymes often begin showing within 4 to 6 weeks. Let me bring everything together clearly. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is not a structural problem without a nutritional solution. It is a metabolic dysregulation driven by impaired PPAR alpha fat oxidation, NF-kappa, B-driven hepatic inflammation from activated Kupffer cells, gut-derived endotoxin loading through the portal axis, and oxidative mitochondrial impairment that compounds every other mechanism. Burdock root's active compounds, particularly artigenin, combined with its prebiotic fiber and antioxidant profile, address all 4 of these mechanisms in the same liver tissue through compounds that are now characterized in multiple peer-reviewed studies. 3 servings weekly of fresh root, or twice daily standardized extract, delivers these compounds at concentrations the research documents producing measurable hepatic fat reduction and inflammation resolution over 12 to 24 weeks. Your liver has extraordinary regenerative capacity. The fatty liver is not a permanent condition in its early and middle stages. The cellular machinery for clearing that fat and resolving the inflammatory damage is intact and ready to respond. It needs the molecular signals to reactivate the pathways that have become suppressed. The research tells us exactly what those signals are. Starting this week, 3 servings of burdock root begins delivering them. The construction and repair team that your liver has always maintained is waiting for the call to deploy. Give it the signal. Dr. Liana out. Before we close, I want to address one more element of the fatty liver recovery story that most people are never told, and that is particularly relevant for anyone whose condition has progressed beyond simple steatosis into early steatohepatitis with beginning fibrotic changes. There is a persistent clinical assumption that once liver fibrosis has begun, once the stellate cells have been activated and have begun depositing collagen matrix in place of functional liver tissue, The process is essentially irreversible through nutritional intervention, and only pharmaceutical approaches targeting the fibrotic pathway directly can be relevant. The research on this assumption has shifted dramatically in the past decade. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have now confirmed that early hepatic fibrosis, specifically fibrosis at stages F1 and F2 on the standard histological grading scale, R, is genuinely reversible through sustained metabolic improvement, and that the reversal rate is significantly faster than previously believed possible. The mechanism is the inactivation and apoptosis of activated hepatic stellate cells when the inflammatory environment driving their activation is sufficiently resolved. When Kupffer cell inflammatory activation is suppressed through NF-kappa B inhibition, as the Burdock-Arctiginin research demonstrates, stellate cell activation signals decrease. When hepatic fat content falls through PPAR alpha restoration, as the Burdock research also demonstrates, the lipotoxic signals that maintain stellate cell activation are reduced. When both processes occur simultaneously and consistently over months, early fibrosis can and does regress. This finding has profound implications for how we think about the clinical urgency of nutritional intervention in fatty liver disease at any stage before F3 advanced fibrosis. There is not a linear, irreversible progression in the early disease stages. There is an active and reversible biological process that responds to the molecular inputs the liver receives consistently through diet. Burdock root, through its simultaneous PPAR alpha activation, NF-kappa B suppression, gut-liver axis normalization, and mitochondrial antioxidant restoration, addresses the specific mechanisms driving both fat accumulation and the inflammatory environment that would, if left unaddressed, drive progressive fibrosis. Addressing it earlier produces faster and more complete structural recovery. Addressing it later, even with some early fibrosis present, still produces meaningful structural improvement.